Before watching the video, can you please save a little bit time, like and subscribe to SkypluS Submover to increase?
Air France Flight 296Q was a chartered flight of a new Airbus A320-111 operated by Air Charter International for Air France. On June 26, 1988, the plane crashed while making a low pass over Mulhouse, Habsheim Airfield, as part of the Habsheim Air Show. The Habsheim Air Show is one of the largest air shows in France, gathering many aircraft models' unique flying. Many original performances were performed with hundreds of aircraft from civil to military, from private to state, all gathered here. The accident aircraft, an Airbus A320-111, registration FGFKC, serial number 9, first flew on January 6, 1988 and was delivered to Air France on June 23, 3 days prior. It was the third A320 delivered to Air France, the launch customer. There were 130 passengers and 6 crew members. This particular flight was the A320's first passenger flight, and most of those on board were journalists and raffle competition winners, having won tickets as part of a promotional event by local businesses. Captain Michel Asselin, 44, had been a pilot with Air France for almost 20 years and had the following endorsements: Caravelle, Boeing 707, 727, and 737, and Airbus A300 and A310. He was a highly distinguished pilot with 10,463 flight hours. A training captain since 1979, Asselin was appointed to head the company's A320 training subdivision at the end of 1987. As Air France's technical pilot, he had been heavily involved in test flying the A320 type and had carried out maneuvers beyond normal operational limitations. Asselin had total confidence in the aircraft's computer systems. First Officer Pierre Mézières, 45, had been flying with the airline since 1969 and had been a training captain for 6 years. He was endorsed on the Caravelle, Boeing 707 and 737, and had qualified as an A320 captain 3 months before the accident. Mézières had 10,853 hours of flight time. At the time of the incident, only 3 of the new aircraft type had been delivered to Air France, and the newest one, in service for 2 days and had been chosen for the flyover. The aircraft was to fly from Charles de Gaulle Airport to Basel, Mulhouse Airport for a press conference. Then, sightseeing charter passengers would board and the aircraft would fly the short distance to the small Mulhouse, Habsheim Airfield. The captain would make a low-level flypass over runway 02, climb up and turn back, and repeat the flypass over the same runway in the reciprocal direction, runway 20. This would be followed by a sightseeing trip south to Mont Blanc before the passengers would be returned to Basel, Mulhouse Airport. Finally, the aircraft would return to Paris. The flight plan was that as the flight approached the airfield, the pilot would extend the third stage flap, lower the landing gear, and line up for a level flight at 100 feet, 30 meters. The captain would slow the aircraft to its minimum flying speed with maximum angle of attack, disable the alpha floor, the function that would otherwise automatically advance engine thrust to 2/GA when the IS reaches max, and rely on the first officer to adjust the engine thrust manually to maintain 100 feet. After the first pass, the first officer would then apply 2/GA power and climb steeply before turning back for the second pass. Habsheim Aerodrome was too small to be listed in the aircraft's flight computer, thereby requiring a visual approach. Both pilots were also unfamiliar with the airfield when they began their descent from 2,000 feet, only 6 nautical miles from the field. This distance was too short for them to stabilize the aircraft's altitude and speed for the flyover. The forest at the end of 34R had merely looked like a different type of grass rather than what it was, a forest with trees. But now that the aircraft was performing its flyover at only 30 feet, the crew noticed the aircraft was lower than the now identified hazard that they were fast approaching. The crew applied full power. Asselin attempted to climb. However, the elevators did not respond to the pilot's commands because the A320's computer system engaged its alpha protection mode, meant to prevent the aircraft from entering a stall. Less than 5 seconds later, the turbines began ingesting leaves and branches as the aircraft skimmed the tops of the trees. The combustion chambers clogged and the engines failed. The aircraft fell to the ground.
Oh no, oh no, oh no. Putain.
During the impact, the right wing was torn off, and the spilling fuel ignited immediately. 2 fire trucks at the air show set off, and an ambulance followed. Local emergency services were informed by radio communication. Inside the aircraft, all the lights had gone out before it came to a final rest. There was no emergency lighting apart from the exit signs. Many passengers were dazed from hitting their heads on the backs of the seats in front of them. By this time, the fire had entered the right side of the fuselage through the damaged floor section between seat rows 10 and 15. A passenger tried to open the left side overwing exit. It would not open, which was fortunate as there was by that time a fire on the left wing. The medical team from the air show arrived and began examining the passengers. 10 minutes after the crash, the first of the fire trucks arrived. But because of the forest, only the smaller vehicles were able to reach the wreckage. Apart from the tail section, the aircraft was consumed by fire. Of 136 people on board, 3 did not escape. One was a disabled 14-year-old boy named Hervé Learman in seat 4F who was unable to move. Another was a 7-year-old girl named Mariama Berry in seat 8C who was trapped, unable to remove her seatbelt after a seatback collapsed on top of her. Her older brother had removed his own seatbelt, but was carried away by the rush of people before he could help his sister. The third was a woman named Marie-Françoise Froche who had reached the front door and then returned to help the girl. 34 passengers required hospitalization for injuries and burns. Both pilots received minor head injuries and also suffered from smoke inhalation and shock. This was the first fatal crash of an Airbus A320. The official investigation was carried out by the Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, BEA. Investigators found that the aircraft had been airworthy, that its weight and center of gravity had been within limits, and that there was no evidence of mechanical or electronic systems failure. With the CFM56-5 engine's flight idle, 4 seconds are required to go from 29% to 67%. It then takes 1 second more to go from 67 to 83%. From the engine parameters recorded on the DFDR and spectral analysis of the engine sounds on the CVR, it was determined that 5 seconds after TO/GA power was applied, the N1 speed of N2-1 engine was 83% while that of N2-2 engine was 84%. Spectral analysis of the engine sounds indicated that 0.6 seconds later, both engines had reached 91%. By this stage, they were starting to ingest vegetation. This response of the engines complied with their certification data. The official report from BEA concluded that the probable cause of the accident was a combination of the following: very low flyover height, lower than surrounding obstacles. The pilots flew too low, too slow, failed to see the forest and accidentally flew into it, and late application of go-around power. Furthermore, the Bureau concluded that if the descent below 100 feet was not deliberate, it may have resulted from a failure by the crew to take proper account of the visual and oral information available to them regarding the elevation above ground level of the aircraft. The report further recommended that passengers should be banned from all demonstration flights. Flight crews should be provided with and ensure proper reconnaissance of airfields. Airline company procedures should be reviewed to ensure they comply with official regulations concerning altitude. In 1996, Captain Asseline, First Officer Mézières, 2 Air France officials, and the president of the flying club sponsoring the air show were all charged with involuntary manslaughter. In 1997, all 5 were found guilty. Asseline was initially sentenced to 6 months in prison along with 12 months of probation. Mézières was given a 12-month suspended sentence. The others were sentenced to probation. Asseline walked free from the court and said he would appeal to France's highest court. According to French law, Asseline was required to submit himself to the prison system before his case could be taken up by the Court of Cassation. In 1998, Asseline's appeal was rejected and his sentence was increased to 10 months of imprisonment along with 10 months of probation.
Thank you for watching the video. If you have idea of a flight, please comment below to everyone discuss.